Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jim Kleiber Show. Today is Wednesday, January 6, 2021. Politically, there's a lot happening in the U.S. Yesterday, there was a runoff election in Georgia for 2 Senate seats, and the seats would determine which political party controls the Senate. And if the 2 Democrats won, then the Senate would be 50-50 split between between Democrats and Republicans. Well, I think it's like 48 Democrats, 2 independents, and then 50 Republicans. And then the tie-breaking vote would go to the vice president, who currently is Mike Pence, but on January 20th would be Kamala Harris. And but if the Republicans won 1 seat, then it would be 51-49, and if they won 2 seats, it would be 52-48. What people are saying from last night is that Reverend Warnock, one of the Democratic candidates, won, and they are projecting that Jon Ossoff, the other Democratic candidate, may have won as well. And so that means that the Senate will be 50-50 tie. The tie-breaking vote goes to the vice president. And like I said, starting January 20th, the vice president would be Kamala Harris. So that would give, I believe that gives the Democrats control of the Senate. I'm not sure exactly how the majority-minority works when there's a tie. And I'm not sure how that filters down to different committees and who becomes the committee chair. I would assume that with the tie breaking, it means that the current vice president is able to, in the event of a tie, choose who is going to be those. I don't know. So historically, just to talk a little bit about that, I think Warnock was giving a speech last night where he talked about his 82-year-old mother, who was picking cotton for somebody else, I think maybe as a sharecropper back in Georgia way back in the day. Instead of picking cotton, she went into this election and picked her youngest child for senator. I just like the symbolism of that, and it doesn't have to necessarily be someone who is of African-American origin or African descent. It can be just somebody to see the transition from such a struggle to being able to make changes and have some power to affect society. Then I believe Jon Ossoff is a Jewish American, and I think they said there was a lynching of a Jewish man in Georgia way back in the day, and it was the impetus for the Anti-Defamation League. It started as a result of the lynching of the Jewish man there. And I don't know. I mean, they can come up with stories about how people are heroes or villains all the time, but sometimes I like the hero stories. I don't really like the villain stories. I like the hero stories a little more. And I think it speaks a little bit to the demographics of what may be happening in the country. And I kind of laughed. I'm like, wait, if Georgia in the South, they're electing a black man and they're electing a Jewish man, well, what's it mean in the North? Not for me personally, but I can imagine there's a lot of people out there who are quite worried. I don't really care. I just want somebody who has a very kind heart and a systemic brain, someone who understands how systems work and someone who is just very kind and loving towards people. That's who I want in office mostly. But I can imagine that some people are worried just demographically. This country has been run by white men for a very long time, and maybe worried that we've done things to hurt a lot of people. And if those people now have power, maybe they're going to seek vengeance on us. I don't believe they will. I think they're quite excited to get in not to do that, not intentionally at least. And maybe there's the worry that it may unintentionally happen. And so I think one way we can get over that worry is we can start having better relationships with people who don't look like us. And we can just start realizing that humans are humans and we're all trying our best. The more that we have interclass, interracial, intergenerational ties with each other, the more likely people are to look out for us. I strongly believe in this idea of connect to protect. If we want people to protect us, we have to connect with them. They have to feel connected to us. If they don't feel connected to us, why would they protect us? If we don't feel connected to somebody else, why do we protect them? We don't protect things that we don't care about or people that we don't feel a level of connection to. So I think the stronger connection we can have with people from different backgrounds and different groups, and the closer we can feel to these people, the more likely it is that we'll want to protect them and that they'll want to protect us as well. So I'm quite excited. I was just thinking about, we may have found, there may be a loophole in the balance of powers in the U.S. So in the U.S., when it comes to not the governance, but in terms of the election process and the representation process, I think the U.S. we created the House of Representatives and the Senate to balance two things. We wanted states to have a certain level of power in the Senate, and so each state got 2 votes or 2 representatives, and then we wanted the House of Representatives to represent the population, so that places that had higher population would get more representatives. So if it were just based on the population, then the states or the places that had the most people would control the country. They wanted to balance it out between that and the states themselves. So the states have a certain level of power. I think when it comes to voting for the president, but even voting for a senator is still voted based on the overall population in the state. So like popular vote. So for example, the vote in Georgia, the highest number, it's a pure numbers game. So like if you run and you get 52% of all of the votes cast in Georgia, you win. So at the state level, voting for a senator, there's not a balance amongst the counties. The counties don't have any power so much. It's just a pure popular vote. And what's interesting about that is that if you have a state like Georgia, where there are more and more people moving into the urban areas, now the urban areas seem to have a larger weight on the vote because there are more people in those areas. So I was just thinking, it's like, oh, wow. So while for the federal government, it's still balanced between the House of Representatives and the Senate, so the population in the states. At the state level, it's when you're voting for that state senator, it's not balanced between the population and the counties, the regional representation. So it's like, what if a lot of these states just started having bigger cities, which we are seeing an urbanization movement across the planet, or we were pre-COVID. I'm not sure if it's going to still be the same thing, but as we have more people moving into cities, if you start having Mississippi have a very large city, maybe one of the cities in Mississippi becomes very large, or one of the cities in South Dakota becomes very large, or one of the cities in Wyoming becomes very large, or one of the cities, I think we're seeing this in Colorado as more and more people move to Denver and Boulder and that area there. As that urban area becomes more populated, the rest of the state doesn't have as much say in terms of who becomes a senator. And so I think we've seen the shift towards more liberal or democratic voting in those places. I hope this furnace isn't too loud for you. It's really loud for me. So I'm going to listen to this recording afterwards and try to check it. But so it's almost like one way to keep getting Democrats in the Senate is to fill many of these states with big cities. I don't know if I should be saying this out loud, but Yeah, it's like, oh, so if there are bigger cities, especially with remote work, now there could be bigger cities in some of these smaller states or some of these more rural states, then um, that could strongly shift the voting in this country. And yeah, I don't know. So just, I mean, politics is a game. As much as I like to think it's this very serious thing, it is kind of a game that people just try to cheat and tweak, and really just kind of play around with and see how people can win. But at the end of the day, it is serious because it impacts people's lives. I mean, decisions that are being made there impact so many of us, not only in the U.S., but also around the world. So many people are reliant on the U.S. government for making good decisions and kind decisions and inclusive decisions, and controversial decisions sometimes, and making the brave decision that we may not want, but is actually good for us. And I think that's a whole different conversation. So in a way, I personally feel excited about what happened in the election. I'm excited to have democratically controlled House and Senate and White House executive branch, because I want to see if they're working together, if they can actually get stuff done. Like, I'm so tired of the gridlock. I probably wouldn't be that against a Republican-led Senate and House and like all branches if the Republicans were more moderate and not trying to build walls to keep out immigrants. If they were taking a more sensible approach to, at least what I would deem more sensible approach to dealing with immigration, to try to improve the immigration process so it's easier for people to go through the process, because it's a chaotic process for a lot of people. And so that since it's simpler and easier to go through the process, not as many people are incentivized to skirt the law and try to come in illegally. And just more, what I would deem more systemic approaches. But regardless, I don't know what's going to happen. I feel somewhat excited that there's an opportunity here to at least do some things and see what happens. However, I am worried that there are many people in this country who don't trust the voting process, who don't trust the election process, who think it's all rigged, and give many stories of this happened and then this happened and then this happened and oh, what about this and what about this? And debate on some truth that I can't debate. I don't know whether these things happened or not. At some point, I have to let go and I have to trust somebody to tell me whether it's actually happened or not. If I'm hearing it in the news, I have to trust the journalists. But more than anything, I have to, in the US, I think we determine what's true in the society, resolve conflicts over what's true in the court of law, in the judicial system. And so I don't know who's telling the truth. People lie here, people lie there, people fudge data, people exaggerate, people do things like this. And I think it comes down, for me, to just trusting what happens in the judicial process. Now, some people will say, oh, the courts are rigged, or this person's corrupt, or that person's leveraged or blackmailed. It's like, okay, well, if that's the case, how can we come to a consensus on what is true or not if we don't even have that process? Maybe we're not coming to consensus. Maybe some people are saying, well, I believe this is true, and I don't care if you believe it or not. Well, that's hard to move forward as a society when we don't have some way to level the ground and try to come together to a shared meaning of what the world is. So when people throw out a lot of these allegations of fraud and distrust into the voting process, where I look to the courts and I look, okay, what happened in the courts? Is there any traction? What evidence is being presented in the courts? What arguments are being made in the courts? For me, the courts, this is like the supreme place where people are arguing with the best arguments they can bring, the best logic, the best evidence, the most cogent rationalizations or whatever. And I don't see much traction being had in the courts with regards to proving election fraud at all. It was something like, I think 1 in 64. Like the people on Trump's side who've been arguing election fraud haven't even been arguing election fraud in the courts. I don't even know. I don't think they've even stated that they believe it's election fraud specifically, because there's a very narrow definition of fraud when you come to the courts. When you say it online, you can say whatever you want, but when it comes to the courts and it comes to trying to prove it by the law, you have to use specific arguments. And I think what I've seen is most of the cases have been thrown out quite immediately. Something like maybe they won 1 and then lost 64 of those cases. I have a question here from a listener. Do you agree that the voting process is solely in the hands of the state legislatures? The courts have no role according to the U.S. Constitution. Do you agree that the voting process is solely in the hands of state legislators? I don't know what the law is. I think so. I think the voting process is designed to be distributed throughout the states. Looking back, this is total guess because I don't know for sure. Looking back on the history of the U.S., it started with the Articles of Confederation, where there wasn't a very strong national government, and it switched to the U.S. Constitution to unite the states. But the states still had, they were almost like independent countries in some ways. And there was a strong fight between having more and more federal power or national power and having power in the states. The courts won't even hear the evidence. All have been thrown out due to procedural issues. From what I've been reading, well, I don't know. From what I've been reading, they haven't even claimed fraud in these cases. I don't know. I'm not a judge. I'm not a judge. I don't know the law super well. And so I just have to look at it and go, okay, it doesn't look like they're winning. It doesn't look like they're proving their point that there was election fraud. And if it's being thrown out across the board in so many different places, it's hard for me to say that all of these judges were corrupt and all of these judges are biased and all of this. Like, I don't know how many. I don't think it was 64 different judges, but I don't. It's hard for me to listen. I trust the judicial process, especially as it has more and more eyes on it. Now, maybe there are people out there who don't trust the judicial process, and again, I think that's a bigger problem, because if we don't trust the judicial process, if we don't trust it to work, then how do we come to consensus on conflict that we have here in society? It's one of the things I really struggled with when I was living in East Africa, is just not trusting the law enforcement, not trusting the legal process. I felt really scared. It really worried me to live in a society where I didn't trust that. But here, personally, I trust the majority of the legal process. Yeah, I think there's definitely bias towards certain groups in some ways, but I don't know. Can you name one case where the evidence was allowed to be presented? I haven't followed them that specifically. From what I've heard, there have been no or very few allegations of voter fraud specifically, or election fraud, in the courts. There have been plenty of those allegations. People have made those on television, on Facebook, on Twitter, on many of these media channels, but not so much in the courts where they have to present the evidence. And for me, if the lawyer can't come together and even do the procedural thing right to present the evidence, that's part of the problem. I mean, the law is about following process, and you have to follow the process. I don't know why they got thrown out. I think a lot of them got thrown out because they didn't present evidence, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they got thrown out because there was some other aspect of the procedure that they didn't follow correctly. But even then, that's part of the judicial process. They have to follow the process to come to a result. I mean, law is all about process. It's not really about results. It's about following certain processes and certain rules. And if time and time and time and time again, I mean, if something like 1 in 64, if 64 times they didn't follow the rules in how to present the evidence, then like, I don't know what to say. SCOTUS rejected the Texas suit based on standing. Yeah, because that's not following the rule. Apparently, Texas was trying to say that, I don't know if it was Georgia or Michigan or some of the states didn't vote properly. But Texas doesn't have any jurisdiction on saying, from what I understand, on saying whether other states voted properly or not. Texas can't come in and say that Michigan is doing something illegal with their, what do you want to say? Their sales tax or something. Dred Scott, I'm not familiar with the Dred Scott case. I know it happened quite a while ago. I don't know exactly how it came to fruition or how it got brought to the courts. I mean, again, a lot of this is me. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. I'm not intimately involved with the legal system. I think it comes down to how much do we trust what's going on. For me, I think I give a lot of trust to the legal process because I can't know all of this stuff. And I haven't studied law. So even if I studied by my own, maybe I can get to a good level of knowledge on law, but I'm still not a lawyer. So maybe there are certain things that I haven't learned, but I think I know, but I don't know. So I guess for me, it's just recognizing there's so much I don't know when it comes to the court of law that I just back off and say, listen, I trust the lawyers who are well-trained. I trust the judges who are well-trained. I trust the other lawyers who are well-trained to figure this out. But I wonder if the court of law even matters that much anymore when we have so much communication on the internet. Because I think many of us are not caring what happens in the courts because we have so much communication on the internet with other people that we believe what's true, whether the courts say it's true or not. And perhaps this started way back. Maybe this was even similar to what was going on with the O.J. Simpson trial, where people were forming opinions about what happened from, I think the whole trial was televised. And so many of us were forming opinions on whether we thought he was guilty or not guilty. And we weren't lawyers and we didn't know what the process was, but we were certain about what happened that night. We were playing jury without actually being there. I don't know. Maybe that's part of the process too, right? We have jury who don't really know the law and still are trying to follow an answer. Texas represents the citizens that are protected to equal protection of the 14th Amendment. A vote in Georgia should be equal to a vote in Texas. A vote in Georgia should be equal to a vote in Texas. I mean, I don't know why they threw out the case. I believe it's because maybe that's an argument one could make in the Supreme Court for the reason why they shouldn't throw it out. But it's at the end of at some point, I have to accept or keep fighting to change the law or change the interpretation of the law. I don't know. From my argument, if I hear that a vote in Georgia should be equal to a vote in Texas, yeah. And then the next argument would be to abolish the Electoral College because a vote in Georgia should equal a vote in Texas, should equal a vote in California. I mean, that's what a lot of my friends would say hearing that, is that we need to go to the next level. Okay, if you really want the votes to be equal, then let the votes be equal no matter where a human being lives in this country. But a lot of people don't want that. No. Texas, yeah, I mean, and perhaps that's the thing. There's disagreement on the law, and even when a law is decided, it's decided by majority vote most of the time, and that means there's a minority who still don't like it for any law, for any decision. There's even when we vote things and vote people into office. I mean, look, the people who got voted in, maybe in Georgia, are winning with 50% or 51%, 52%. That means, 48 to 49% of the people didn't want that person in office. But what other system do we have? I mean, how can we come up with a system where I don't know. I don't know what the other solution is. Do I know what the actual Wisconsin law is regarding absentee ballots? No, I don't, because I live in Michigan. I don't know too much about Wisconsin law. I don't know too much about Michigan law. Like, I just have to at some point step back and I guess trust the process. But I don't know. Maybe there are people who don't trust the process and think that there's lots of cheating everywhere and people are screwing the process all the time. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I think I got a lot more heated in this conversation than I thought I would, because I'm getting really, I get really frustrated with myself trying to know everything, and then at some point just trying to step back and say, I don't need to know everything. I can trust other people to do it. This is something I struggle with in personal life, in work life, professional life. But sometimes I come across a field where I really don't know too much. I try to learn, but I guess I just think I have stronger limits when it comes to the law and not knowing. One person, one vote, voter ID, and a fingerprint if there is no ID. That's the Wisconsin law? Or that's a law that you want each state to have? And if that's the Wisconsin law, was it not followed? If it wasn't followed, is there a lawsuit proving that it wasn't followed? Is there a case where there was evidence presented? And I just, for me, it's, I don't, if we don't trust the justice process, the judicial process, and the legal system, I don't know how we're going to resolve conflict in this country. Because I think the whole purpose of the legal system is to resolve conflict that we can't resolve amongst ourselves. And if we don't have kind of this filter, this funnel where there's a place where we finally come together to resolve the conflict, all the conflict that's been simmering at the local level and then the regional level and then the state level, if we can't come together and have an agreed upon arena to resolve this conflict, then it's not going to resolve. And I think a lot of people have lost hope and a lot have lost trust in the legal process. And that's where we try to resolve conflict on our own. If I think about it, when I lived in East Africa, in Tanzania, a lot of people would, I don't think a lot of people trusted the judicial process and the law enforcement. And so if somebody would steal, they wouldn't wait for the cops to come arrest this person, because if they arrested him, maybe he'd get out immediately, or they wouldn't even arrest him. And so a lot of times if somebody steals something, people would point to somebody and say, Mwizi, 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 which means thief. And then other people would start chasing this guy. And sometimes they would catch him and then they would beat him. Sometimes they would do horrific things to this person because he stole something. Because in a society where there isn't an agreed upon resolution process, there can often be mob justice. People take the resolution in their own hands, and often the resolution doesn't resolve. And it's just, and I think we're seeing this on the internet, where there's not a resolution process for a lot of the stuff that happens on Twitter or Facebook or other places. And there's a lot of cancel culture, which is kind of like mob justice. Hey, you did something and you're not getting in trouble for it, and the courts aren't doing anything. We're going to come in and teach you your lesson and resolve this conflict ourselves. Now, I don't think it always has to be a violent resolution of the conflict. I think it can be done in more of a restorative justice way, where it's actually resolved instead of just perpetuated by committing violence to the other person and kicking the can down the road a little bit. But yeah, so I think losing faith in the justice system and losing trust in that process can lead us to not resolve a lot of our conflicts. This has nothing to do with Wisconsin law, just common sense. India can handle democracy. Why can't the U.S.? There are many people here in the U.S. who believe that the U.S. does handle democracy. I mean, it's hard. So I believe that there was if any, there was maybe a handful, and I'm talking less than like 100, maybe 500, less across the whole country in terms of voter fraud this year. So for me, the US handles democracy incredibly well compared to so many places around the world. But for some other people, they don't believe it. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this discrepancy in belief. And when we have two different beliefs and there's legal ramifications for the two different beliefs, typically it would go through the legal process to resolve it. And the legal process is an ongoing thing, right? So if you go to the courts and it doesn't work, then maybe you keep going back to the courts. Maybe I'm just hoping that people would say, oh, the court settled this and it's settled. But maybe that's not how history has ever worked. Maybe if it's a 9-person Supreme Court and then they resolve a conflict 5-4, the people who are on the side of the 4 are still frustrated and still fighting for the law. Maybe this has happened with many things in history, with civil rights law and with other things that maybe I would have voted for, is the people who are persistent and continuing to fight against what they think is an unjust law. And maybe that's part of the process. But for me, I think they followed the law, and the question is whether that law should exist. And I think that's a separate question. And so whether there was a tremendous amount of election and voter fraud that happened this year, I strongly believe there was not. And I am open for a conversation about whether we should change the laws so that voting happens in a different way. But do I think that people followed the laws? The vast majority of people in this country and electioneer officials followed the laws? Yes. Do I believe that the laws could change to make it more efficient, more effective, more fair, more kind, more loving, more whatever? Yeah, of course. Let's talk about that. I'm open for that conversation. But for me, there's a conversation about, did people follow the current law? And the separate conversation, should that law be changed? And I think those two get conflated sometimes. Or we say, oh, it's not fair. Okay, it's not fair. Fine. But did it play by the rules? Yeah. Well, okay. Then the law is not fair. The rule's not fair. Let's change the rule. It's like playing sports. If I'm playing basketball against somebody and the person is like 8 foot tall, that's not too many people. If the person's 7 foot tall and I'm 6 foot and we're playing basketball and it's a 10-foot rim, they have an advantage. They can dunk easily. I can't dunk. It's not fair. So I don't like the rule. But it's like, oh, but they were playing on the 10-foot rim. I'm like, yeah, but that's the rule. I don't like the rule. So next time we play, we're going to lower the rim so it's more fair for me. And they may say, oh, no, it's fair to have it at 10 feet. But we can argue about whether the rule is fair or not, but that's a separate conversation than is, did they follow the rules? You know, I believe they follow the rules in this election because I believe the courts and their decisions that they've made. I guess that's just it. But other people don't believe the courts. Other people believe what they believe. And maybe this comes down to challenges in belief systems where some people believe some of us have more I think we all believe different things to be true based on different things, whether it's our personal experience. If something happened to us, therefore it's true. Some of us has that bias. Whether it's something that a famous person said, sometimes we believe that's more true than something that somebody else said to us. Whether it's something that science says, sometimes we believe that more. Sometimes it's something that religion says, we believe that more. Sometimes if it's something blah, blah, blah that says. So we have different trust in different organizations, different people, different processes in life to come to the truth. And maybe that's the clash that we're having where I don't know. I it's hard for me to understand because for me, I just believe that the people who are experts at figuring out what happened will figure out what happened. And I just kind of have to sit here and either become an expert in that so that I can figure out what happened or trust them, I guess. I don't know. I've rambled a lot on this, and it's because I worry about us as a country and us as as a world going forward where a lot of beliefs are being I wanted to use a big word and I don't know it. Inculcated, I think, where a lot of beliefs are growing and becoming stronger through the interaction on the internet. And law doesn't really know how to deal with the internet and crossing jurisdictions. So for most of human history, we have been relegated to our geographies and our local geographies. But now with the internet, we communicate with people all across the planet in an instant and across many of these geographies, which have very different laws. So we think we're all in the same place, but we're all in different places according to the law. And I don't know how the law is going to figure that one out. I don't know how we figure that out when we have no hierarchy or hierarchical law system, when we have no global law system to regulate, and not just regulate. Regulation is basically just setting the rules to help resolve the conflict that arises across geographies. So who knows? I spoke really fast on this call, this show. I hope that I didn't burn off your ears or excite you or make you nervous or angry too much. I think sometimes emotions can, I think always emotions go with the speed and the tempo. It's hard to feel sad when somebody's moving very fast. And it's hard to feel angry or excited when somebody's moving very slowly. So I hope my tempo didn't throw you into an emotion that you didn't want to feel. And at the same time, it's okay to feel whatever you feel. Ending on that strange note, I appreciate you for joining in and hope to talk to you all soon. Take care, y'all.